Indian Military Review and the Centre for Joint Warfare Studies organised a webinar and virtual expo on digitisation and networking in the armed forces on 21 to 24 November 2020. The sessions included communication networks of the Army, Navy and Air Force and interoperability, network-centric warfare and how they are undertaken by each service, C4ISR, including the naval experience, the Army's use of UAVs and beyond visual range operations, decision support systems, particularly communication to weapon systems and identifying friend and foe, information, data and big data challenges including information sharing and managing information overload, space domination and satellites by officers from the Defense Space Agency and DIPAC, and new technologies which included artificial intelligence, 5G and Internet of Things.
Jai Hind, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the sixth session, the session Decision Support Systems. So we had a very interesting and educative fifth session with the Chief of Air Staff giving out his the experience of the Indian Air Force on the networking models which are being exploited by the Indian Air Force. And then we had Kal Kuber who spoke to us on the industry perspective. Now in the sixth session, we are very fortunate to have an old colleague of mine, General Panu, who will be chairing the session. He has written extensively on technology and military, and having known him, let me say that a grounded soldier with intellect who understands technology and who understands how military needs to exploit technology, and especially as the Deputy Chief of Integrated Defense Staff, the amount of workshops he held on technology, induction, absorption into the armed forces, the impetus given by him, I think will stand in good stead for a long time to come. Thank you very much for spending your time and joining us. General Panu, of course, is an old hand and known to most of the participants out here. He's been the colonel of the Maratha Regiment. He's served as the Military Operations Directorate on 3 different tenures, that is one more than me. Of course, we were here together in the MO, and he did all the work while I could surf the internet and get myself educated on digitization. We also have 3 other speakers, and thank you for spending time. I will leave it to General Panu to conduct the session. Over to General Panu.
General Bhatia, Director St. Joss, and Major General Ravi Arora, Senior Editor, IMR, to have invited me for this very important session on decision support systems. Really speaking, when we talk about the decision support systems, it's going to be discussed with me and the panelists. We are supposed to have 4 panelists, and I only see at the moment 3. I suppose the 4th one would join at some point. So we have about time till 12:15, and the panelists would spend about 10 to 15 minutes on their subject. But what we are going to be talking about literally is the nerve center around which the network centricity rim works. Needless to say that we are into the technology-based warfare, and this is dictated by various possibilities that the new industrial age, that is the information age, has offered to us. Literally speaking, anybody who can do information domination, he will be able to, master the battlefield. The next generation is actually moving faster. As the technology grows, we need to adapt to these new technologies. It is so that the technology is actually moving ahead of the military, and I wish the military could guide it. The problem with us is that India has been deprived of technology for very long, and we have been importing systems from different origins, and we do not achieve compatibility because the origins are different. the legacy is also a problem. Though we have the trade specialization, but we are not guiding the trade through military professionalism. So as a result, the legacy systems that we keep bringing in and we keep changing with half solutions have also created a problem while the attempts are being made. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a great opportunity that we sit together, facilitated by this webinar on digitization and networking. When I put these two words together, digitization and networking, literally speaking, we are actually getting into smart systems, where the man, machine, and the weapon systems are being combined together to fight a battle in the tactical battle area, and as also to bring war to the war room, which I call it as a strategic vantage point. You know, olden days, of course, you know, the senior commanders would go on a hilltop and watch the battle and give decisions from there. But it is really possible today that if we can bring in good systems and bring war to the war room can actually work as a strategic vantage point where the OODA literally can be automized. When we say OODA can be automized, I'm not talking about shortening OODA. Shortening OODA is a step lower than that. But when you are going to automize OODA, literally speaking, your algorithms got to be thought through very well by the professionals, military professionals, and not the industrial professionals. Industry can only make it possible, provided the military professionals can guide them exactly what the outcome is required through technology in the battlefield. So if we have to automize OODA, we really need to make sure that the military commanders deeply get involved with technology, which is ubiquitous in connectivity. And that is how the success in the battlefield can be achieved at all levels, and not only at the front line, but at each domain of it, whether you're talking about logistics, you're talking about bombing, about technology, you're talking about everything and anything, including economy of war. Now, what is important is that when you're talking about information and then you're talking about decision, we need that the information should be provided timely. It has to be correct. The decisions got to be aided, but not interfered with. You know, sometimes what happens is when you are sitting in a strategic vantage point, a junior commander, which is completely empowered and enabled, should not suffer a disadvantage that somebody at the strategic level is sitting there. He should facilitate his decision making rather than interfere, which is going to be a problem. Second thing is the technology should replace human being, yet not override human being. The human and the command has got to be the master technology. If we are not, then the other way around would be very devastating to the battlefield. As far as the artificial intelligence is concerned, it makes robotics a case of the greatest outsourcing of the most dangerous jobs in the world. Now, technology must assist in guarding our borders. But today, are we talking about those kind of borders which are conventional in nature, when most of you are going to fight hybrid war, where the borders are redrawn? Literally speaking, borders are limited only up to your mind. In fact, they are the one which target your mind. And therefore, we go into psychological warfare, where mind is the key. Once the mind is targeted, which sits in the nerve center, then anything can be manipulated. Bad news is the one which can lose anybody's morale. The news actually may be good, but it can be made to look bad. And once the morale is low, military is a dead machine. Soldier must get into technology, but he should not be cluttered with technology. We must make sure that it is simple for him to adapt. It is simple for him to fight, rather than create a problem and frustrate him. And we have an example with us, which is a BMS, which created more clutter, more hardware, more wiring around him. And then at some point you realize that we need to junk it because it was getting too logistically, and technologically a big clutter. Another issue is data. Data is the king. And based on the data, the AI engines got to be run. But we need to own the AI engines. We cannot allow the AI engines to be operated somewhere else. So security is of prime importance. The Air Chief also spoke about the quantum technology. literally speaking, when you have secure systems, only then can you trust them. If you do not have secure systems, you do not know whether your systems are yours or not yours. You could be actually fed information which is not correct, and you could be taking a wrong decision based on the fed information which is fed by somebody else for you to be misguided somewhere else. Another issue is in the rapidity of warfare, in the speed of warfare, because technology is going to make it really fast, you have to bring in instantaneously in operation, whereas no latency is going to be permitted, because a country which has got more latency will actually lose the first draw. And anybody loses the first draw loses everything. And more so if the nerve center is going to be targeted, you can lose the first draw battle. As a result, we need to draw these lessons very carefully. I would not now stand between me and the panelists, because we are going to speak about the decision support systems as we have conceptualized over a period of time. India has been actually investing in technology, but the point is that the military commanders, unfortunately, have not understood it. It is people who understand technology have been pushing certain concepts, but the senior commanders have not been able to literally absorb technology. And therefore, what happens is that the two generations don't create a good mix. And I think it is up to the senior leadership to realize this, that we need to make sure that those who are in the information age, for those who are in the digital era, are actually integrated into the system at the strategic level also, to bring in that kind of decision support. We have 4 panelists with us, and I would request each panelist to take about 12 to 15 minutes, and then we will have about 10 minutes left for question and answer session. My first panelist, of course, would be Major General Sanjay Rehani. He'll walk you through the concept, evolution, and the future of the decision support system. He shall also bring about where we are today and where we need to go and how, because decision support system is not new, but it is a continuing process, and we need very quick outcomes for the battlefield integration. As far as Sanjay is concerned, he is ADG Information Systems, and there is no better man to speak on the subject. He's from Corps of Engineers. He's a mechanical engineer who's done MTech from the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He's done all courses which the top of the line officer is expected, including the NDC. He would give us an overview on the decision support system. Over to my first panelist, Major General Sanjay Rehani.
Thank you very much, Panu. A very good morning to all the participants. My special compliment of St. Joe's for organizing this wonderful event. Our gratitude as team DGIS, headed by the DG, Lieutenant General S.T. Upasani, for the invite to be a part of the deliberations on the construct of this important aspect of the military decision support system forces. Gentlemen, as we have known, warfare has evolved through attrition to maneuver to the net-centric phases, with respective premises of firepower, mobility, and information. And in order to establish asymmetry or adversity in these areas, the firepower, mobility, and information were the prima donna. The way firepower is managed through various platforms, calibers, ordnance, and also accuracy through acquisition, guidance, and logistics. Similarly, information requires a credible management. Information is the only, may I repeat, the only tangible input which is available for decision making and is neutral and inexhaustible.
Sanjay, sorry to interrupt. Are you sharing a presentation?
Negative, sir.
Because I can't see you on the screen, and neither your presentation. So Panu sir, can you see him?
I cannot. I cannot see the screen.
Now it's okay. Now it's okay.
Sir. I'll continue, sir. A word about the current and little futuristic environment. On the organizational front, theaterization is a suitable format. In a suitable format is likely to come. This implies a Penta service, and I'm including now the DRDO as also the Coast Guard possibly, an international or at least a subcontinental imprint. New MOUs like the BECA, LEMOA, and the CONCASA open up new corridors for information management. Newer technologies and weapon systems like directed energy weapons, shockwave technology, high energy materials, and drones are likely to change warfare. Even communication means like Li-Fi, which will be replaced for the Wi-Fi, stands for light fidelity. Laser and optical communications would affect in a drastic manner the way information would be passed. This would entail a secure, accurate, timely, and authentic information as a bedrock of the entire information management system. Therefore, the need to have a highly flexible and upgradable system in place. A word about our past and current status. We continue to follow our EDP plan of 1985 on to 2010, which defined the operational, data, and logistic requirements. Some efforts have been made by the line directorates with respect to CICP, Emerald, MISA, etc. Possibly, a core weakness was the coherent planning, steering with defined interdependencies and correlations, leading to duplication without workflow integration. There has been a lack of SSOT, single source of truth, and therefore the credibility, as also the visualization of the data that we have. The capability of unstructured queries and complex analytics is highly restricted in our current corpuses. A critical network support is broadband, data center, and comprehensive network security. There are issues with respect to IAM implementation, usability of OSC, and data encryption. Therefore, what exactly is the requirement? The aim is to provide the right information to the right person at the right time and in the right format to enable right decision in peace and in war. The requirement, therefore, is to have 1. An intricate information management to exploit for tactical strategic ends in combat. 2. The technical infusion to capture huge data volume with single source of truth. A well-defined point of entry for the data. Online visibility with multiple views of stakeholders and flexible analytics. And 3. The metadata to be repository for deep analysis. The way forward is to shift from the process-oriented development to a data-centric, or maybe if I may extend, application-centric approach with emphasis on accuracy, integrity, authenticity in an agile and incremental manner. An alternate approach enabler is the platform approach. That is something like UIDAI or Aadhaar card, which gives the methodology of build, test, and scale up approach suited to a large enterprise. It allows agile development incrementally. For example, we had the eKYC, then Universal Platform Interface, and then on to DBT. A change approach, therefore, in the form of AIDSS, that is Army Integrated Decision Support System, would be appropriate. The information management ought to be data/application centric, planned enterprise-wise, and developed incrementally based on an overall architecture. The 3 mutually exclusive sectors of information are adversary, that is Dushman, own, khabar apni, and terrain, zameen, with corresponding applications of CISR, IAIS, and GIS. These are required to manage the data of Indian Army comprehensively. Own information generally is subdivided in HR, equipment, stores, and finance, and is more structured during the capture. The adversary information needs to be built bit by bit from varied sources. Both these require georeferencing and geotagging for credible combat planning and the operations. Thus, the need for a central governance for the data. Data in various forms is the prima donna of information system and is the new oil. Data needs to be obtained and processed technologically to yield value. The technologies of database, applications, and networks represent storage, processing, and conveyance of data respectively to finally extract value. This value leads to timely and correct decision making. The three drivers to change the information strategy and the architecture are: 1. Operation, applying enterprise-wide access, online data, query and analytics, reliable scientific analysis with flexible development. 2. The systems, implying data-centric approach, centralized data governance, agile process to go live fast. And 3. The technological, employing high-speed networks, flexible analytics, agile and microservices, etc. A word about the online visualization and analytics. Credible data must lend itself to online visualization, its analysis and assessment on as required basis. The level of analytics would progress from being descriptive, that is what, where and when, to diagnostic, that is why, and finally predictive, what next, to aid decision making. The rich data repository would also facilitate a deep analysis. There would be 3 underlying layers prior to visualization. That is, first, the input layer with interface to data capture agency, which is technically enabled. Second, the processing layer, which pre-processes the data before storage for analytics to ensure integrity and authenticity. And thirdly, the storage and analytics layer, which precedes the visualization layer, contains the business logic, all information. And this is the core of the system. A word about the core. These include the following. Firstly, a centralized implementation. Second, needs to be designed. Third, a platform approach. Fourth, agile process. Fifth, microservices which are required by the Army. No vendor lock-in, which has been a major drawback with us in previous adventures. An API-based integration and with open standards. This would give the system ability to scale up, be flexible, and also render expandable and upgradable with respect to the digital dynamism. The desired capability must therefore include common operational picture, an integrated intelligence scenario, joint operational logistics, facilitating a speedy and informed decision, ensuring momentum of operations and optimum resource allocation. A digitized command and control capability would ensure collation and sharing of operational intelligence and logistics. Necessary integration also with strategic agencies like RAW, NTRO, etc. would cover the entire spectrum from tactical to strategic level. The softwares need to cater only up to the combat zone, that is core level, less the ones at the unit level and below. The need is to have a software-driven approach, software to hardware ratio of somewhere between 0.8 to 0.2. This approach has been just the other way around in our previous ventures. The in-house first should be the development approach where logic and outputs are formalized.
General Sanjay, may I request you to finish quickly, please? You have 1 minute left.
I would take about 1 minute more, sir. The in-house approach would give us the logic and outputs being formalized. Therefore, thereafter, the development partners can be incorporated for various modules. The bandwidth offered by the NFS and ASCON Phase 4 needs to be used for in a big way. The system of regional data centers would cater for the data storage and computing requirements. Identity and access management through second factor authentication would also be a must. The developer of the software project can be the DJIS, with ownership rights being with the operational and logistic directorates. Therefore, the AIDSS would be a software application with facility to ingest georeference input into a pre-designed data structure and provide a comprehensive picture to the commander to include the ISR, the operational, intelligence, terrain, op logistics, and the HADR. A robust communication and data centers with computing capability would be the other essentials. In conclusion, we are looking for a software-driven system with strong communication spine and data centers with requisite computing facilities. In the end, my best wishes to the organizers and participants for the webinar. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Sanjay, for bringing in a very nuanced way how the decision support system should be built. The only thing that I would talk about the common operational picture, and we spoke about how our legacy systems got to be translated and brought into theaterization and also integration. Only thing that we need to watch for is that we are making a constant shift between how we organize ourselves. Every day we come out with a new model of organization, which the technology will not be able to correlate to, because the organization is going to be supported by technology. My mind goes back to the Loginet and the Emerald systems that we could not later on bring together. Unfortunately, there's a little pun in this, but I think we are best in making silos. You know, nobody can break an Indian silo. And we continue to build systems, and you spoke about the army integration into the support system. So literally speaking, when we start making our own systems, the army makes its own system, Navy and Air Force go around making their own system. Where is the capacity to get the strategic forces, the Nuclear Command Authority, the RAW and NTR into it? I think it looks good in theory, but I think people have to sit together, and those who need to see the common operational picture, first they need to have a common agenda. You can't have different agendas and yet want a common operational picture. So I think we cannot sit in different silos and start building castles, which we think the others will adopt and adapt to. I think you give a very good way ahead of how the software and the application-based system should come about, which is application centricity approach. But I think it has to be ubiquitous. It has to be integrated at the conceptual stage, in which we bring in industry right from the time we start thinking about it, and not once we have half-built siloed systems and the industry can do very little about it. The second speaker we have is Group Captain Hemant Kumar. He's going to give us a perspective on the target identification by the Indian Air Force, and how do you take a decision to engage a target or not engage a target, how to use a network into cutting short the OODA cycle. Group Captain Hemant is a combat experienced fighter pilot with almost 3,000 hours under his belt of flying. Awarded the Youth Seva Medal in 2019, while in command of a frontline squadron, which is of Mirage 2000. He shall share his experiences on how to go about identifying targets and how to develop that into a network-centric approach. Group Captain Hemant, please.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, I would be giving a talk on IFF challenges and network decision support system. Both the topics are extremely important, and the first topic has been into prominence since the first conflict of human mankind. However, the second topic has gained prominence in the recent years with advances in networking technology. Modern air combat is primarily decided by the balance of advantage in situational awareness. Given broadly comparable numbers, the force which can provide its commanders and participating crew with superior awareness of enemy position, track, and identity will have major advantage in any clash. For commanders, battlefield transparency through situational awareness will arm him with necessary knowledge required to arrive at the right decision in shortest possible time. For crew undertaking the missions, high situational awareness will allow them to correctly identify aerial targets in shortest time so as to be able to timely maneuver for a successful engagement. Therefore, two ingredients in order to win a battle tactically are time-sensitive correct decision-making and accurate identification. Both these cannot be achieved without high situational awareness. The identification of a target largely depends upon the number of assets participating in a conflict zone and also their variety. The greater the number and variety, greater is the requirement and complex is the identification. Since no operation is carried out in isolation, conduct of simultaneous operations adds to the complexity of identification. Therefore, number of simultaneous operations would govern the likelihood of misidentification and hence the greater requirement of correct and accurate identification. Variety of plans are exercised during the course of conflict by own as well as enemy forces, which changes from objective to objective and is generally based on the progress of battle and gains or losses made thereof. All the forces participating might not have the visibility into all the plans, and hence the changed plans leads to greater confusion. In a large conflict, operations are not undertaken by a particular service in isolation, and hence the varied nature of warfare being fought by respective services adds to the already existing identification crisis. Joint training may overcome this aspect to a great extent. However, it cannot be brought to zero. It can be very well summed up: the number of assets, simultaneous operations, variety of plans, and varied nature of warfare all contribute to increase in fog of war and reduction in overall situational awareness leading to misidentification. With advent in technology, the means of identification and reliability have increased manifold, but that has also brought us the complexity in the way the battles are fought. In fact, it has become more challenging to correctly identify who is who. The correct identity is absolutely necessary, not only to avoid fratricide, but also to carry out timely engagements. Various methods can be adopted by a service to achieve this. However, efficacy of each of these methods is limited to amount of human intervention and the secrecy which you can maintain. Various methods are use of various standard operating procedures or the procedures which have been prepared in consultation with all the parties who are likely to participate in a mission or operation. These procedures are refined from time to time so that these remain effective. Another means used for identification is utilization of electronic equipment, such as identification of friend or foe, and also receivers, such as automatic dependent surveillance broadcast, or as we call it, ADSBs. Next in line is the use of SDR. All the modern forces are heavily relying on this equipment. The equipment carries out continuous exchange of data with all the network SDRs and thus is able to auto-identify friend or foe. Use of flight plans is mostly applicable to the civil flights and has limited use for identification of military flights. In this method, correlation of flight is carried out with submitted flight plan. Having seen various methods of identification prevalent all over the world, now we will look at various challenges which exist in utilizing each of these methods. Use of procedure heavily relies on the set of defined procedure which needs to be followed by all the agencies involved, be it aircrew flying the machine or the controller guiding the aircrew towards its target, and thus calls for high workload on all, as all needs to be aware of the procedure invoked and needs to follow them to the last word. Since all the agencies need to be aware of the procedures, and any ignorance on part of anyone can lead to break in chain, and thereby aligning the whole of Swiss cheese model, leading to misidentification. The more the number of the stakeholders, greater are the chances of misidentification, which is the case with the use of procedures. Since these are written procedures and human involvement is solicited at all stages of identification. There are very high chances of information getting leaked out. Therefore, the secrecy of procedures is extremely important. Set piece of procedures may give away the method being adopted for identification. Enemy may exploit the same after carefully studying the pattern. Therefore, the users of procedures are extremely vulnerable to enemy exploitation. In order to deny the enemy regarding information on the procedures being adopted, continuous change in procedure would be required and would have to be changed from mission to mission. However, doing so, once again, would call for procedure to be known to all the stakeholders and thus calls for greater degree of involvement from all. This will subsequently again lead to increased workload, greater chances of breaking chain, and higher chances of misidentification. With advancement in technology and to reduce the chances of fratricide by reducing human intervention, IFF as an equipment came into being. It's a radar-based identification system designed for command and control. It uses a transponder that listens for an interrogation signal and then sends a response that identifies the broadcaster. IFF may be used by both military and civilian aircraft. IFF was first developed during World War II with the arrival of radar and several friendly fire incidents. Despite the name, IFF can only positively identify friendly targets and not hostile ones. It cannot term them as hostile. To be able to do so, the interrogator and the responder both need to be equipped with the desired equipment. Compatibility and serviceability of equipment would matter a lot, as both interrogator and transporter should be able to talk to each other at all times. These are open source equipments, and hence utilization of these would make you visible to all using the equipment and may disclose your position, even if might not have been picked up upon primary radar. Thus, one has to be extremely careful in using it in a conflict. The utilization of IFF equipment is very much prone to spoofing, and adversary may utilize it to their advantage. In order to deny such an activity by adversary, mission-specific codes are generated. Even mission-specific codes can be spoofed on the fly after studying. The secrecy of the code is an extremely sensitive issue and need to be ensured at all times. Vulnerability to enemy action do exist as because of the presence of human element in generation of codes, and dissemination of the same still exists. Since IFF codes needs to be set accurately as per the mission demand, any mistake in setting up of the same may lead to misidentification. Also, all the agencies involved in control of the forces need to be aware about the codes which have been generated, and thus situational awareness in terms of these codes is absolutely essential for all. Almost similar is the case with the use of automatic dependent surveillance broadcast receivers. The difference being in the continuous use of transmission of data without interrogation signal has been said, and thus one requires only receivers to be able to receive broadcasted information from the aircraft. It can also be received by other aircraft to provide situational awareness and allow self-separation. ADSB is automatic in that it requires no pilot or external input. It is dependent in that it depends on the data from the aircraft's navigation system, mostly in use by civil flights. However, nowadays we are seeing the use of ADSB even in military flight as well.
Can I request you to conclude, please?
I'll just take 2 more minutes regarding software-defined radios. This is a new equipment which is into being and is being utilized by all the forces in the world for carrying out identification of friend or foe. It's an equipment, a radio communication system where components have been traditionally implemented in hardware and instead implemented by the means of software. The programming and waveform generation of SDR is a specialized task, and for effective use of SDR, one should be self-sufficient in the same. This is the most important and challenging aspect in utilization of SDR. Use of SDR once again calls for the human intervention, and since the core of SDR is this waveform generation, the secrecy of the same needs to be maintained at all levels. When SDR is utilized for fratricide avoidance, it becomes incumbent on all participants to be equipped with the same SDR, and the same waveform needs to be ported onto all the SDRs. The last I would talk about is use of flight plans. The use of flight plan is generally carried out for all the civil flights which have filed their flight plans in advance. The correlation is made made for the same, and thereafter you come on to the identification of those particular flights. The method relies on the correctness of flight plan. Apart from the correctness and details, the track subsequently flown should mimic the submitted flight plan. Any deviation in the same will lead to misidentification. Awareness at all levels regarding the flight plan, and thereafter the track needs to be there for accurate identification. Since the method being adopted is entirely dependent on submitted flight plans, the secrecy of these flight plans is of utmost importance. With this, I have finished the art of challenges. In case you want, sir, I can continue with my talk on network decision support system. There are two more slides, sir, in case you permit me.
Okay, quickly, if you can please wind up in 1 minute.
Yes, sir. According to Boyle's decision-making offers in a recurring cycle of observe, orient, decide, and act, an entity that can process this cycle quickly, observing and reacting to unfolding events more rapidly than an opponent, can thereby get inside the opponent's decision cycle and gain the advantage. Due to sheer number of agencies which participates in a conflict at tactical and operational level with respective specialized roles, it becomes absolutely necessary to have a participative decision making. Networking is also required so as to be able to derive correct and updated information from various entities. Decision makers need to be presented with various options in order to tackle a situation, and networking helps in achievement of the same. No amount of resources enough, and hence scarcity of resources is spent all the time. Networking helps in management of assets and facilitates economy of effort, which is the need of the hour. The various tools which are available are the online tasking orders, which can be seen by the commanders, and he has got the full visibility into all these plans. It gives an insight into the planning of a particular mission, parameters taken into account, asset allocation, and the leftover asset available for subsequent planning. This helps in timely interjection into planning if need arises based on the progress of the battle. Availability of asset management tools arms commanders with necessary knowledge about availability of resources, their locations, and thus aid in redistribution of assets depending upon requirement and research. Networking of surveillance assets is the need of the hour. Achievement and utilization of the same helps in increased situational awareness on the missions being flown. The input can be made available at tactical and operational level for quick decision making. However, networking has got certain challenges since we have to rely heavily on electronics, computers, and communication. Network breakdown can take place anytime. They are prone to cyber attack, prone to spoofing. Quality of link and link locks can happen at any time. We have to rely on the bandwidth which is available to us. Need to continue updating the records at all the time so that current information is available to the commander for making his decisions. Availability of equipment and communication in remote places is the area of concern, and we need to provide these equipments at the remote places. And network compatibility has to be there at all the time because various kind of equipments need to be networked, and if they are not unable to talk to each other, then it may lead to certain issues, and commander will not have the exact picture which is required for all this. To conclude, to win a battle, commanders need to take timely decisions so as to shorten the OODA loop and get inside enemy's OODA loop. Prelude to this would be to have accurate identification for early target acquisition and engagements. Networking ensures centralized command and decentralized execution and also helps in ensuring economy of effort. All these arm a decision maker in taking correct and timely decisions for timely tactical engagements. With that, I finished, sir.
Thank you, Group Captain Hemant. You brought about a very good perspective, the Air Force perspective on info domination, and also how to guard your own IFF and how to make sure that you making sure that secrecy of your flight plans and secrecy of your data, more so by using the SDR, is maintained. Thank you very much for this perspective. Our next speaker is Brigadier Anup Jakhad. He is the commander in the CIDSS. He is going to speak to us about the communication to the weapon systems, and he will also briefly talk about the battlefield management system and beyond. He has worked intensively on this and would talk about the future of the technical battle area where network centricity is concerned. Brigadier Anup is an RT officer. He commanded a regiment and a brigade in the Eastern Command. He has done all the military courses required to reach at this level. And currently, he is the Brigadier Operations Information System. I welcome Anup to kindly deliver his talk.
Thank you, sir. My topic, which has been given to me, is communication to weapon system and the background of net-centric operations. As I understand what the net-centric operations means, it's a knowledgeable exercise of authority for targeting or maneuver. And in this background, it was the Gulf War actually which demonstrated how net-centric operations pan out, where integration of multiple aerial, including space and ground platforms having position location identification capability, duly supported by high bandwidth satellite communication, ensure round-the-clock surveillance, weather data, navigation, and making it possible for increased battlefield transparency and monitoring of tactical battle area. Once the targets were identified, its information was processed in a real time or near real time, and appropriate weapon systems were allotted for its destruction. This entire war fighting was possible due to decision support system called Global Command and Control System, consisting of smaller subsystems including Army Battle Command System, Maneuver Control System, Advanced Field Artillery Tactical Data System, etc., etc. However, most of the advanced and progressive countries, particularly China, have taken the Gulf War as a landmark event and started modernizing their armies or armed forces. China per se took it as a challenge and to reform the PLA through comprehensive digitization and networking in order to create a new joint forces capable of fighting wars under conditions of information. However, when we are looking at the Indian context, we should look at the Western armies, or particularly the army of USA or the armed forces of USA. Two things which are strikingly conspicuous in the whole gamut of this war fighting concept in the net-centric operation are, firstly, identification of friendly forces in the rapidly changing battle space. That is, the American armed forces had achieved it through trans-receivers which were attached to each and every platform, including the foot soldier, who is also considered as a platform. This is obviously a prerequisite for conduct of a net-centric operation. Second most important thing was about the fail-proof, secure, reliable communication having high bandwidth with adequate redundancies, which connects not only the weapon delivery platforms, but the entire sensors, computers, and commanders in loop. With these things, however, now let's look at how the Indian tax C3I systems panned out. The Indian Army envisaged the system almost in a similar fashion, where Command Information Decision Support System, or the CIDSS, was the hub where information received from various subsystems like Battle Surveillance System, Air Defense Control and Reporting System, Electronic Warfare System, were to be processed for commanders to take informed decisions for targeting through Artillery Combat Command and Control System. The Battlefield Management System was conceived to allow commanders to see disposition of own forces vis-a-vis the enemy forces locations. Since all platforms, formations, weapon systems were seen through secure network communication grid, hence communicating with the weapon system was much simpler. However, unfortunately, the Army TAC C3I system has not come of age in the desired manner. Now, how are the communication now in the present situation dealing in the Army? Despite having induction of various weapon systems of new inductions, which are varying in range up to 30 kilometers to 300 kilometers, the communication arrangements have not undergone major change. The VHF combat net radio remains the basic media for communication backed with cable JWD. Limited OFC and a small footprint of satellite communication base is present. The hinterland communication is through microwave or the ESCON system. However, the present day communication is not looking for the communication of future, because the communication of the future needs to actually connect the entire decision support system. Now how the communication of future should be planned for undertaking net-centric operations? Since it will be a gradual and a slow journey to achieve the same, our communication system should be future ready. Therefore, there will be some prerequisites of communication system which needs consideration. Other than being reliable, robust, fail-proof, secure, all communications have to be encrypted with capability of passing data, which means that it will require a very high bandwidth. Second point which is to be looked at the redundancies. The redundancies have to be built in through variety of media rather than through variety of equipment. OFC needs to be backed by satellite communication or a vice versa or a HF or a CNR of a different configuration. More critical the weapon system, more the layers of redundancies, or better the planning for having better media for looking after the critical assets. Future-ready communication in the sense that our communication technologies threshold graph indicate that they are improving every 4 to 5 years. Therefore, it will be prudent that our communication system should be built around open protocols, which will facilitate ingestion of new technologies without delay. Just for example, the new technology of 5G have to be factored in our planning today, because this technology will become part and parcel of our lives in next 10 to 15 years. In battlefield, the new technology will allow even the weapon systems to talk to each other. The earliest example which General Rihani had spoken about, the light fidelity, it is going to replace Wi-Fi in a very near future, where communication will be established through light emitting diodes, and if we don't plan it now, we'll be too late. Next is the security of communication. All communication systems are vulnerable to enemy action, and the biggest threat now being the cyber attack. Such attacks undertaken at critical junctures may change the outcome of war, and therefore the security is of paramount importance. Next is the networked arrangements. Not only the communication system had to support the decision support system, but also need to support its own network, or to say self-healing in case of disruption is to be built in every arrangement of communication. Now the communication for interoperability or undertaking the joint operations. Our communication guidelines for all the three services have to have a common protocols, not only while planning for it, but also while undertaking procurements for or new acquisitions which we are making. While discussing communication to weapon system, one of the most important issues which have overarching bearing on the conduct of future operations for Indian Armed Forces, especially for the joint operations, is the position location identification, or simply putting, all our forces need to be identified in the TB through indigenous GPS. And to be precise, what we are looking at, our NAVIC system should be integrated into our weapon, surveillance and communication system. Having seen this, let's now look at how the communication in the TBA is to be planned. While more or less our communication arrangements have been planned, but with the advent of new weapons or surveillance systems with higher ranges, communication arrangements need to be reached. On location of weapon platforms in TB or criticality of assets or type of media, or with the sole aim of ensuring achieving fail-proof communication with provision of catering for disruptions. Now, the three types of media which is available in terms of communication is satellite, the OFC, and the radio. Now, if we look at the satellite communication, this is the ideal media for an extended coverage. It is considered to be safe media. However, it's vulnerable to direct kinetic weapons and new space jammers which are being developed both by the US and the China. However, availability of communication in the present day is highly limited. We need to focus to increase this manifold. Not only this communication synchronous orbit, but more also in the low Earth orbit. Especially during the hostilities. Second is about the
Anup, can you please wind?
Optical fiber cable. A network of optical fiber cable is the ideal media for achieving network decision support system. While the network is best suited for defensive operation, however, augmenting this with tactical of OFC can allow conduct of offensive operation to quite an extent. However, tactical OFC is costly and therefore needs to be planned in our budgetary planning.
Anup, can you please hurry up?
Pardon?
Anup,
Yes, sir. I can hear you, sir.
Yeah. Can you please try to finish?
Okay. So second is looking at the combat net radio. Like the Air Force panelist has already conveyed, the SDR is the new combat net radio which can transmit data. If we look at the long range vectors, which we have sets of around 300 kilometers, the best communication media is the satellite communication, which has to be backed with the other communication in terms of OFC and the HF or the microlink. When we are looking at the guns and the rocket systems, the best media which we can have up to the ranges of 30 kilometers to 90 kilometers is OFC, which is linked to the Army Combat Command and Control System, Fire Control System, which can be planned on the OFC. However, there is a case in point when the direct link of an acquisition or the UAV can be established directly to the fire delivery system with prior permission of commanders controlling the battle area, as was done by the Russians in the northern Syria. When we are looking at communication today, just to since the time is at premium, I'll just summarize what I have spoken about. The communication today is the capability to establish a data link rather than only a voice control. Since enemy is going to disrupt communication, redundancies are imperative, and therefore more is the critical weapon system, more is the number of redundancies required for that, and either through the variety of media or through variety of systems. The net-centric operations is all about identifying on force locations in vis-a-vis the enemy, and therefore variety of media will allow greater flexibility. In a network system, cyber security gains critical importance. Communication systems should be planned in open standards so that future technologies can be ingested without delay. And finally, communication media, especially the satellite and NFS, should enable us to undertake joint operations. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Anup. You've given a nice perspective on how the TBA should be wide and how the TBA should have redundancy and security, of course. Brigadier Suresh is the next speaker, and he would also talk about the requirement of bandwidth and the latency, because in future you're going to have in the TBA a requirement of gigabytes and terabytes in the war zone, as the Chinese also talk about. So how do we make sure that there is no latency? How do we make sure that all those platforms which are there in the foreseeable future in our design are all given the connectivity which is reliable and which does not fail and has no latency? He will also talk about the mobile connectivity, the 5G and the SDR. Brigadier Suresh is an officer from Corps of Signals. He's done a post-graduation from IIT Mumbai, alumnus of CDM, and he's got a good amount of experience in handling the ESCON and ARIN, which have been our mainstay legacy systems, and is currently Commander 5 Signal Group. Brigadier Suresh, can you please start your talk? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll first load my presentation. So first of all, I thank the chair for giving me this opportunity to speak on a very important conceptual topic of bandwidth and latency, which affects the networks overall, sir. So I'll start by quickly giving a quick insight about what is bandwidth and what is latency, sir. Bandwidth is a measure of capacity, that is what volume of traffic and at what speed can be carried in a network. It in turn depends upon firstly the media. Different kind of media, be it optical fiber cable, the copper cable, the satellite, microwave, radio, each of these media will have a different capacity. And when we integrate them in a network, the sum total will be of the bandwidth that is available would be decided by the weakest link of the entire network. Second issue is the type of data. As we understand that we require more bandwidth in case we have video-centric traffic which we want to transfer vis-a-vis a voice traffic. Similarly, a real-time traffic would require to be handled with more bandwidth than a non-real-time traffic. Third aspect is the network topology. The way the network has been engineered between the user and the central services, say a data center, will decide as to what kind of a bandwidth can be made available, say for a critical applications. So this is what we understand as bandwidth. Second is the latency. Latency is a measure of delays. A delay occurs it's inherent in all media. Some pertinent delay will happen. Similarly, the delay will also be there in the transmission, where a whole lot of switches come into play which processes the data. And subsequently, there will be queuing delays in a data center or a survey or in a server where the data is stored, retrieved, and processed. So bandwidth and latency put together decide the network reliability and the network availability. And if we want to optimize the network, the bandwidth and latency become the key factor. So where are we today? Our network is based on the ATM-based switches, which are of about 2 decades back. This network was providing the requisite bandwidth in the past. We're able to manage to a large extent today, but in the near future, which is already there, I would say that the requirements are already there. These are inadequate because our bandwidth today are typically 34 Mbps or STM1. The latency that typically we provide in our network is 60 milliseconds, whereas the next generation network would require a bandwidth of up to 50 milliseconds or below. If that be so, I would now quickly apprise the audience as to what are the reasons for which the bandwidth are required. Firstly, we have already started inducting large number of systems, be it ADCNR, ACCCS, the various battlefield surveillance systems, and some more are in the offering. We also have large number of applications and services. We have Army-wide area network, we have management information systems, we have human resource management system, we have centralized inventory control processes, and there are plethora of web services that are now being offered on the Army intranet, and also the video conferencing. And as various speakers have brought out in the previous sessions also, that this scenario of COVID has also increased our requirement on many of these applications, in particular the video conferencing. So all that is adding up the requirement of bandwidth in our network today. If that be so, what are the other aspects that we need to keep in mind? The next aspect is the net centricity. We all are working towards ensuring the net centricity in our organization in the defense services. To my mind, the two important tenets of net centricity are: we have to create an info grid which provides near real-time communication support for all kinds of applications. And in turn, it shortens the sensor to shooter link. And as Chair brought out earlier, to this we add the commander's participation in the process, which will further enhance the sensor shooter requirements. So if this is what we want, so what kind of a communication infrastructure we should look forward to? First of all, we should have a high capacity backbone network, which is capable of carrying out auto rerouting. That is, there is multiple media, which was also brought out by the previous speaker, Brigadier Jhakar. So this is also an important aspect, that we should have multiple media so that a particular media fails, the network is capable of rerouting the traffic. Then we must have a multi-layered network management system. Each of the layer, be it satellite, microwave, OFC, etc., should be able to be managed separately, as well as there should be a centralized management of the whole system. So therefore, which enhances the automated process. Third is the data center or the cloud services. That should be available, since the kind of application that we are running requires large terabyte kind of a storage, and also it requires big data analytics and other processes which should run, and also the services should be available on the fly, so the cloud services. And the fourth point is that we should be able to include the CNR and the mobile communication networks, which are going to be the mainstay in the tactical battle area, into this core backbone network. And finally, which is common theme into all our activities, is that interoperability of all the systems that we induct, including the terminal equipment. Now I'll quickly bring out what kind of a network we have today. We have the central picture which shows the red background, the core network. We have a core network based on ASCON. As I brought out earlier, it is based on the ATM switches, about a decade or 2 decade old technology. We are on, as far as the media, largely we are dependent on hired media. To some extent, we have created a limited captive OFC. We have also got satellite footprint in the remote areas. On this core network rides all our applications, be it Army Internet, Taxi 3i, MISO, etc. And our users are in the access network. For them, these services, applications are extended through this core network with the help of the RN, CNR, satellite, OFC, DFC, and mobile communication. So this is the broad communication architecture. So I would stress importance on all three aspects. We need to be focused on application. As brought out earlier speakers also, our approach should be application centric. So applications are important. But at the same time, the core network is the one which is bridging these applications to the user. So it is very vital and important that we have a core network which supports the next generation communications. And lastly, the tactical battle area or the forward elements need to be taken care of by providing the mobile systems with adequate bandwidth and latency. If that be so, what are the present challenges that we have in our network, for which we are saying that it is not adequate to meet the requirements? Firstly, we have a mixed network architecture. So we have a mix of OFC, copper, microwave, and satellite. Some of them are vintage equipment, and so they create their own problem. As I brought out, the latency as well as bandwidth is a concern of media. Second is the legacy equipment. We have in the core legacy equipment, and when it comes to the access, we have inducted various modern equipment, but in totality, we are still stuck up with a mix of equipment or legacy equipment. Third is the interoperability issues. So while we have done some kind of changes in our network, but we are facing the interoperability issues, and this will remain a recurrence in the future also, but we are much more aware and experienced now to not to have this kind of problems. Secrecy is very important. Today we have got plethora of secrecy for all kind of equipment, and what we are looking for in the coming years is a common secrecy or a common secrecy chassis, which will help us to manage the secrecy resource requirements in a much more holistic manner. Today's systems have got a limited scalability. Either the equipment have become legacy, or their space and resources are not available to scale them up. The reliability is suspect. And the network management system, the kind of NMSs that are available, do not help us to provide the same automation as we look forward to. So these are the challenges which are creating a bandwidth constraint and affecting the ease of connectivity between sensors and shooters. So where are we tomorrow? How are we going to address these issues? So we are largely addressing this issue in the core network by the induction of the Network for Spectrum or the NFS project and the ASCON Phase 4. So what all does this project cover? We will have a captive OFC at the physical layer, and this would be common for all the three services. So we have a synergy automatically built in this project. We have a DWDM-based transmission layer, and it is at the photonic layer, and it will ensure not only a higher bandwidth, but reduced latency. We have a IP and PLS systems working on this, which will provide converged voice, data, and video. As has been highlighted by some of the speakers earlier, we have to become data-centric more than the voice-centric, and this will automatically happen with these kind of systems being inducted. And we have also need to be focusing on the edge of the network communication. To some extent, the projects are in the offering, be it SDR or TCS, or we are also looking for various options in the mobile and satellite communications to enhance the connectivity there. The UNMS or the Unified Network Management System is part of the Project NFS, which will allow us to carry out the centralized management to enhance the capability of the network. Through this diagram, I want to bring out that we are going to have a national backbone, which will be common to all the three services, providing the capacity to switch traffic up to 400 Gbps. And onto this core backbone will the various regions get connected, the various commands will get connected. And we have got a centralized network operation center, the security operation center, which takes care of all the cybersecurity concerns, and data centers which would take care of our bandwidth or our data requirements of terabyte or beyond what we have envisaged for all the applications that are going to come up. This entire communication grid is going to be flexible, and it will provide the desired resilience that we all seek for. Now I'll quickly summarize as to what I have brought out. My topic was very conceptual. So I tried to bring out the quantifiable issues to understand this bandwidth and latency aspects. So while the network today is providing the basic communication requirements of net centricity, and it has met the requirements very adequately in the past few years, but there is a requirement to shift, there is a paradigm shift required from voice-centric to data-centric, and as I brought out in my slides, it is automatically happening the way we have planned and are inducting our newer systems. Second point I want to flag is that systems and applications are very important to automate this functionality. We need to focus a lot more on the applications, and there could be, as the chair had brought out earlier, we work in silos, and the applications need to be dovetailed into the overall process into one single umbrella if you want to create some kind of a synergy between the network and the applications to the users. The last three bullets are related to the communications in the tactical battle area. These are some of the important technological concepts or the technology which I want to flag, which will be important in the coming days. First is the software-defined radio-based mobile ad hoc network, which has been adequately spoken in the previous sessions yesterday. We also should look forward to a mobile cellular communication systems, predominantly the 5G based systems, and satellite on the move. The satellite issues have been very adequately emphasized by Brigadier Jackard earlier. So satellite will remain an important aspect for the TBA communication. So if all these things are addressed, some of things are getting addressed today as far as the core network is concerned. The rest of the things have to be focused more, and we will have what we require in terms of bandwidth and latency. With this, I finish my presentation and I hand over to the chair.
Thank you, Suresh. Thank you very much for bringing out a very nicely explained diagram of core network, and also the need to switch from the voice to the data centricity. We are running short of time, but I would just give one or two comments before I open the house for questions. What is happening is that as the technology and as the data centricity is becoming the prime focus, we in our bandwidth and in latency understanding of it, we've not been able to identify how much data is required or how much bandwidth is required per module of a tactical or a combat unit. For example, the US Army had already worked out in advance how much does a special operations team or a combat team require in terms of bandwidth and how it will grow over a period of time. Similarly, I think we need to create tactical combat modules for giving them bandwidth under which they can acquire systems and operate systems. But as I understand, over a period of time, it is going to be terabytes of data flow, which is going to be required in a tactical battle area. We need to secure those systems. We need to own those systems. We do not have fabrication and we do not have manufacture. And we also do not have testing facilities of that scale that even if we are importing these systems, we can test them. And even when we have testing facilities, we should not have the testing agency to become an inspector and a hurdle in getting the technology into infusion. Also, I think we need to stabilize as far as our organization is concerned, our doctrines are concerned, and our policies are concerned. The moment we shift our policies, our doctrines, and organization, we will never have the technology fixated to a point, as I was talking about, on allocation of bandwidth to a tactical unit, which is integrated unit. And when we talk about industry, I think the future is going to be driven by three things: power, materials, and electronics. With this kind of a mobile connectivity and data which is going to flow, I hope we can supply enough power, such as batteries and generators or what have you, to make sure that there is no break in power supply, because all these are basically going to be run on stability of power supply. That is one big takeaway. Second thing is we need to invest a lot in materials. Most of the materials that our industry is using are import. Even if the design is indigenous, which is actually mostly not indigenous, it's also imported. The materials are imported and our fabrication is also not there. That is going to create a problem. Our material is the one which we need to own material, and we need to make sure that electronics is something that we understand. If we have to talk about reliability, we have to talk about ruggedization, and we have to talk about miniaturization. We need to create a good ecosystem between the entities which are to fight a war, not only in conventional realm, but also when I talk about shifting from conventional border wars to the hinterland, where there are no border lines actually when you come to cyber warfare, and then you talk about hybrid war. So therefore, when you talk about cyber connectivity, network connectivity, information intelligence, and then the robotics come into it, it makes the whole thing very complex, and we have to pre-design, make up our mind what we want for ourselves in next 7 to 10 years. We need to make sure that our organizations are stable in organizing, and we have an education system in place so that all those who have to implement this completely understand. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I thank my panelists, Major General Sanjay Rehani, Group Captain Hemant Kumar, Brigadier Anup Jakar, and Brigadier Suresh for bringing in this perspective. I hand it back to Major General Arora and General Bhatia. Should there be any questions or time left, we can take this forward.
Thank you, General Kanu. Thank you very much for the conduct of this session. It was, I must say, very educative, very interesting. Thank you very much. We'll call out the major issues and the points which have been suggestions which have been given and include in the proceedings. Thank you very much. We are slightly out of time, and we'll just switch on the next session. And my thanks to General Kanu, Major General Sanjay Rehani, Brigadier Jakar, Brigadier Suresh, and Group Captain Hemant Kumar.